Hi, Kay. It's a roller coaster, isn't it? And I think if you remember what happened last time around, the period of Donald Trump's first presidency, that was a bit of a roller coaster as well. Everyone, markets, investors, politicians, looking each day to see what he would do, and then the reaction happening. This time, it's clear that it's going to be the same. And I think a lot of people, Kay, were listening to what Donald Trump said about tariffs. It said it was his favourite word in the English language ahead of the election. And now they kind of wondered at the time, is he actually serious? Is he going to impose these tariffs? Well, now it looks like he is indeed serious. And so now you're seeing the market reaction. But as I say, we have to wait and see what happens in the coming hours and days as to whether this stuff gets imposed. If it does get imposed, it's going to be a very big deal indeed.
If you were a betting man, what would you say?
I don't bet, Kay. I don't bet. But partly because who knows? I mean, to be honest with you, like a lot of people, I wondered, this is such a consequential thing. This is the world's biggest economy. It is basically a kind of free trade area throughout most of North America. If you're imposing tariffs, particularly big tariffs, and 25% is a big tariff, what that does is it means that all of these supply chains, whether it's making cars, whether it's getting oil from Canada and turning it into gasoline in America, all of these things have been able to flow basically freely for decades. If suddenly you're saying there has to be a tariff on basically everything, that's enormous. I mean, we here in the UK, OK, so we have a recent memory of Brexit. OK, but think about the difference here. So Brexit was something that the UK voted for. Then we had years of negotiation. Then you had the agreement between the UK and the EU, which meant there are no tariffs. So at no point were there actually tariffs between the UK and the rest of the EU. In this case, if it does go ahead, and it's in the next, potentially tomorrow, then you're talking about tariffs instantly, overnight, in a way that we never had, in a far bigger economic area. So it's of enormous consequence. And I think everyone, there's been market reaction this morning, which has obviously been negative. I think even looking at that market reaction down by about 1.5% here in Europe, I think a lot of people are thinking, well, it's not necessarily going to go ahead, because if this stuff does go ahead, and if it impacts not just for a few days, but for years, you're talking about big economic consequences for America, for Canada, for Mexico, for China, and for the rest of the world as well.
Yeah, Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform, says that it is a negotiating tool.
Yeah, and he also said, the UK is in a slightly better position because it's outside of the EU. And I mean, actually, that's true, because we are not affected by the tariffs that Donald Trump imposes on Europe. There's a separate negotiation that happens with the UK. And it's quite possible that the UK has a better hand in that, partly, frankly, because if you're looking around the world, so the thing that Donald Trump dislikes is he dislikes when you are reliant. So the fact that the US is reliant on other countries to import all goods from those other countries, particularly China, and also you've got these other places like Canada and Mexico. He doesn't like that. He doesn't like deficits, as economists call them. If ever there were one country in the world that has a bigger deficit than America as a percent of GDP, it's here. It's the UK. So in a sense, we kind of come from a position of, I don't know if you call it strength or weakness, but in as much as we're one of the few countries in the world which actually imports more or less just as much from the US as we send to there, then that negotiation is potentially coming from a position of slightly more strength. But as you say, how much of this is just about negotiation? How much of this is about, imposing these tariffs for a long time? I think, frankly, still people are trying to work that out. It's definitely, this is something that he likes to use as leverage. We know that. But there are many other implications to putting tariffs in. And one of them is to say, listen, we're putting up these walls around our economy, and over time, we want to become more self-sufficient. If that's the argument, then you need the tariffs in place for a long time, and you're talking about much more economic adjustment and basically, in the short run, damage. So this is massively consequential. This is one of those areas where, you can't really overstate how big of a deal it could well be. And just looking at markets, it's going to be bumpy. It's going to be bumpy for a while as we try and work out what's happening here.